Welcome to the Data Coffee Break podcast. I'm Mark.
And I'm Christian.
If you are passionate about data like us, take a seat, relax, and join us to our coffee break where we discuss all things data.
And remember, there are no filters, no PR.
It's just a real life experience. So let's begin. Christian, I can see you hiding some music instrument behind you. What do you have?
Hi, Mark. Yes, you cannot see it on right now, but I do have a guitar, acoustic guitar, and a bass guitar. Same as many people, I guess, listening to this podcast. I'm a frustrated musician.
Frustrated?
I decided to get a career in tech, and I'm quite happy because that's why we're having this podcast right now. And how are you?
Yeah, fantastic here. I was sick the last 2 days.
Oh, no.
Getting better. That's good. As a musician, you say I think our guest was also a musician. He's hiding his electronic drum. So we have Adi on the line. Adi, welcome. Quick introduction about you, because clearly for Christian and myself, we're super excited to have you here. So if I'm correct, you starting to work in 2 different consulting firms in Israel. Those firms were actually Tableau partners, and that's where we actually, the 3 of us, met. For the one who don't know what is Tableau, so Tableau is a modern BI tool. And there you work as marketing manager, then a director of business development, director of sales as well. And after you actually made a big jump, you came in London to work at Tableau. So that was pretty nice. And you did that with your entire family, so with your wife and, if I remember, 2 kids. And at the time, I think I started to work a lot with you. Maybe the same for Christian, maybe a bit after, actually. You've been to President's Club multiple times because you're such a successful salesperson. I can acknowledge for that. And as said, we're super happy to have you on board here because we thought it could be nice to have a chat about what is pre-sales and sales, and what is the relationship that we have between those 2 roles. And we both worked with you. We both learned a lot from you. Maybe you learned from us. I don't know. But welcome to the podcast, Adi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, Christian. I'm happy to be here with you. Thank you for the lovely introduction as well. I'm looking right at my electronic drum kit that I used to, anger management as well as frustrated musician stuff in between work-related stuff. And I think the topic of today's podcast is really interesting because it is something that is really relevant both for the solution engineer side and the account executives of today.
And what brought you to work in sales, actually?
It's an interesting question. So when I went to the university, I didn't really know what to do. I did my MBA in a general business degree. I started off actually as an analyst in one of the banks in Israel. And afterwards, I sort of felt that it's not really for me, this 9 to 5, stay in front of your computer, doing an analyst daily job. And I was starting to look around. And luckily for me, in my company back then, there was an opening in this sort of business development or sales role. It was not really clear at the time because the company didn't have this role. So I jumped right in. I said, why don't I give it a try? I didn't really think about myself as a salesperson up until that point, to be honest. But then things sort of started to roll. And I sort of fell in love with the interaction with the customers and prospects, the personal relationships. And from that point on, I just stayed in the sales and sales-related roles.
That's super interesting. I really like when someone talks about their journey and how they get to the role. And how did you get into pre-sales, Mark?
My background is way different. I did an engineering degree in the food industry in France. So nothing related to software. I moved in the UK to actually, at the moment, interesting fact, at the moment when I was considering to move in the UK, I was also interviewing for a role in France for a company called GV La Française. So it's basically they're producing ovens and a lot of equipment for the food industry, so large equipment. And the role was to be actually a pre-sale. So in French, we call that technico-commercial. I didn't understood what it was actually at the time. I didn't get the role because my English was too bad. So I came in the UK, studied, and ended up at Tableau because I was having fun analyzing data at some point, and Tableau became quite a nice solution for that. So that's my entrance, and that's when you point out the aspect of, let's say, between software engineer and pre-sales. Obviously, there is a gap in terms of technical knowledge, but there is the human element where you need to really enjoy being face-to-face with your client. You need to enjoy to have this interaction. You need to also have this kind of sales mindset to bring the clients toward understanding the solution and towards buying the solution at the end.
I think it's very true, and a little bit more than that. You see companies today that treat the seller as sort of, let's say, the all-around orchestrator of the company's multiple solutions. And they have to be a part of conversations, but they cannot really allow themselves to go really deep. And then the solution engineer or the pre-sales engineer becomes so important because they are the ones that really need to identify the opportunity for the seller and not only be the ones who are going deep dive once the seller identifies something. So it's a little bit different, depends on the company, but you see more and more of those sellers who are not trained to be demoers or sellers who are not trained to be the deep divers, and they are more into the broad spectrum kind of offering of the company.
In your point of view, it's because of the difference between some companies kind of mono product and other company being like selling different product, different offerings, that you see those sellers who in this mono product environment, they will be a bit more technical rather than that being more orchestration.
Yes, and I think it's when you look at big enterprise vendors, right, that sell more than one thing, especially with the cloud vendors and all of those tech companies that have huge offerings, 30, 40, 50 products. If you have one AE or one seller who is in charge of a customer rather than a product line, rather than a line of business, then they are really looking into it from the relationship with the customer, the ability to patch into what the customer is doing and what the trends are inside this customer, like really getting deep into the customer. But on the other hand, they just don't have the bandwidth to run across 40 different types of solutions and be acquainted even with those solutions. So they must have a powerful SE because they simply cannot do it by themselves.
I 100% agree with that. And it's good for our audience to hear it from someone like you, Adi, which you are very experienced. If you want to be ahead of your game, or if you want to be a well-rounded up, we say SE to refer to sales engineer, solution engineer, pre-sales.
There is so many denominations. Yeah,
I know. So we're just going to say SE. But if you want to be a well-rounded up SE, you need to be also that person that is hunting for new opportunities as well, right? So you want to be enabling also the account executive to understand whether there is an opportunity or it's not. When should someone not consider working as an AE or SE? In your experience, Adi, have you seen, of course, without calling names, someone they say like, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't be doing this.
I think what you mentioned earlier is definitely key. So if you are not comfortable in conveying your ideas, in relaying the message, in talking to other people in the relaxed way that we are talking right now, because of many different reasons, right? You can be shy, or you could be a person who is avoiding confrontation, which is happening a lot when you do sales and pre-sales, right? You get a lot of objections. And if you view these objections as blocking, then obviously it's something you need to either work on or something you need to understand that this is getting in your way of success. So I would say, yes, the personal aspect of the seller or pre-seller is crucial, because you saw it yourself, Christian, when we were involved in deals with customers, you have to be this person who challenges the customer.
Oh, yeah.
Who says no sometimes, right? The power of no in a sales motion is huge.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you put your hand in front of the customer and say, either we don't do that or that's not the way to go, sometimes it gets you credibility with this customer even more than when you're trying to speak about yourself and your product and your company and your message. And so you have to have this level of confidence, even the slightest, to say, Mr. Customer, this is the way to go because ABC. Your way is maybe okay. You obviously do it politely and you don't, get into confrontation. But you need to be able to challenge the customer maybe as much as the customer is challenging you.
That's true. I came in some calls being honest, and that was some also depend on your ethos, obviously, but I was on some calls with the AE, and the AE wanted to sell in some aspect the product, and I said no, I don't think it's a fit for these clients. I wouldn't support this case, and it's important as well in this aspect.
I think that if we have sellers listening to us or AEs listening to us, they probably think to themselves, wait, but the seller always has to say yes to all. Right? It's like a common thing, right? The seller always sells things even if they don't exist, sells features that are still way far ahead in the roadmap of the product. But I think that when you get past this initial phase of getting the message across, and when you are talking in a deeper way with your customer, then the power of no comes handy. And I think that when we talk about pre-sales and sales, the pre-sales is sort of perceived as the most professional entity that is coming towards from the vendor side, coming towards those conversations with the customer. And if the professional entity comes says, this is not the way to go, again, credibility comes in and the customer sees it as a positive thing rather than a negative one.
Kind of perceived as a counter check in a way, yeah.
Quick one. If you're enjoying this episode and our show, please make sure you follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Links are in the description as per usual.
Also, if you'd like to grow this community with us, think about sharing this episode with a friend or a colleague interested about all things data.
Now, back to the episode. I would like to move us to a slightly different topic, but it's still related. We talk about, within pre-sales, a lot of sales cycle. In your view, what is it and why is it important, the sales cycle?
Sales cycle is sort of a definition that changes from sectors to sectors, from companies to companies. I think that you have to understand that there's a path to go when you want to get a message across, convert it into a solution, convert it into technology, and then convert it into commercial and let's say money or our next step, which is deployment from the eyes of the customer and kind of get those things forward. You have to understand there's a path, and the path changes, can get really long sometimes, and can be really tedious. And then when you work together with the pre-sales, it's like our listeners cannot really see me, but it's like going up and down in like an intertwined way with the seller and the pre-sales. Sometimes pre-sales is more involved, sometimes the seller is more involved, but the cycle is basically this number of activities that you take with your other side, which in our case is the prospect or the customer.
What's interesting is like depending on the client, on maybe the technology as well, the way, obviously we're speaking about the sales in person and the pre-sales. There is obviously many other individuals that can be involved, like legal, customer success manager and things like that. But pre-sales are, if you look at the overall journeys, they're not involved that for a long time, I would say, from some technologies, some deals. And it's in very specific places. Do you see like as like using the the pre-sales in the right moment critical, or is like it's important to involve in bit there in the different part of the sales cycle?
That's an excellent question, and I think it really depends on the culture of your customers, the culture of the territory you're trying to sell into. Some of them would require technical assurance or technical credibility right from the start. So, for example, a lot of customers that we used to work with together, you saw it. So the first interaction, even in the cold calling kind of approach, you pick up the phone, you call the customer specifically around technologies that work for the tech side of the customer, right? So you pick up the phone, you call them, and the second question is technical. The third question is technical. And if you don't get across those questions, sometimes you don't get across to the next step, which is as early as a demo or a discovery session. You don't even get to these points because you haven't established your technical credibility. You can say that you're a Gartner leader. You can say that you have 800 or 900 customers in your territory, but still, if you're talking to the head of data or the head of BI or the CIO or the CIO team, usually they will come at you really quickly. So for me, and you saw it when we worked together, we sometimes initiated the very first conversation with the customer together. So the pre-sale cannot come sooner than that. But I think it depends. Sometimes pre-sales and solution engineer comes a little bit down the road after discovery and after we understand how to feed this solution engineer with ideas and notions and what the customers want to achieve. And then they come with a more tailored approach towards a demo or towards a technical discussion. They know what to aim for. And then again, this dance starts. It's like a dance between the seller and the pre-sale. Usually, in my experience, the pre-sale comes for the demo and technical session. Then a technical Q&A comes, and then sometimes a little bit silent while the use cases form up, and then the pre-sale comes back in to talk about POC, to talk about evaluation, to talk about the tech stuff that revolves the actual product. So the peripheral systems, the installation, the security, those aspects are really important. And then I think once the security aspect and all of those kind of nitty-gritty stuff, that's when it comes back to the seller to take it home, as they say, but not before.
Yes, and this really takes us to the concept of pre-sales being a co-pilot. And I would really like to get your views on this, because sometimes we see AEs looking at pre-sales as free resources that they can just send to customers and go, and when you finish, just come to me and let's see what we do next.
Whether the pre-sales provide a service to the seller, obviously, I think not. I think that it shouldn't be like that, because pre-sales and sales, they have a mutual goal, agenda, activities. They need to feel each other. They need to understand where each of them is going, and they shouldn't be working in a relationship of, hey, these are your tasks, complete them and get back to me with a check, right? It's not how I see things. I hope that a lot of organizations don't see that as well, like that, because that would be counterproductive. I do see the co-pilot aspect of things between the seller and the pre-sales, and maybe sometimes they're co-captains, right? So they fly it together. They fly the machine together, because again, in the world of today, sometimes the AE could be clueless. Completely clueless about how the solution is forming, how the solution is actually answering the needs. The seller can articulate maybe the ROI or the TCO or all of those buzzwords of the bottom line that the company is gaining from using a product. But the actual conversion from use case to actual activities that result in those bottom lines, is something that is usually, I wouldn't say beyond the AE, because we mentioned earlier that an AE has to have this sort of technical flair, but it's something that the solution engineers of our days are leading more and more.
When you say copilot, that make me think about like kind of like symbiosis aspect of, if there is not a good alignment with a salesperson, we're going to see frictions, and the client is going to feel that as well in the call, or even worse if it's in person in this case. So it's like so important.
Definitely. That symbiosis is super important, because otherwise there is an imbalance. I personally have been in situations where the seller just opens the call and say introductions and over to you, Christian, and that's it.
Thank you. I give you the hot ball.
Exactly.
Take the potato. How did you guys like cultivate this relationship with the AE? Obviously, in some companies, like there is no specific alignment between account executive and salesperson and pre-sales person. What do you do to successfully cultivate? Because it's kind of a learning to understand all the pre-sales is working and all the salesperson is working. And do you have some tips?
Apart from having a beer together?
All right. Hanging out together.
Yeah, well, it's a very good point. One of the things that I can say about the most successful deals or successful roles that I was in, is that the solution engineer or pre-sales engineer really became good friends with me. And I think when you come to a point in which you are in a meeting remotely and you slack each other during the meeting and you say, go here, go there, he doesn't get it, go that way, or yes, that's the way to go. And you have this sort of understanding of each other in a way that you communicate like this so freely. You made a good point. You made a good kind of step forward towards success.
And you can trust each other.
And I think one of the things that companies don't do enough, maybe because of manpower problems, I guess, and budget, is to really align AEs and SEs. So a lot of the companies are doing like a pool of SEs to support several AEs, and then an AE needs to sort of ask from the pool of SEs every time, needs to ask a different different request, to make a different request. Then they come, they don't know the AE, they don't know the customer, they don't know the relationship, and things can go south. So I think that if you get to the blessed point of having a dedicated relationship between the SE and the AE, that's definitely a step forward towards success, specifically in the bigger accounts, in the bigger enterprises, where it's so important to keep the momentum, not stray aside, and always talk in the same way.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes I feel it's nice to, let's say, to see a bit of change, like working with a different salesperson, working with a different pre-sales. But as you say, it's good to create this relationship, and in particular for those long opportunities, deals, and for those accounts you, as a sales professional, you work with across many years. You want to bring a bit of consistency in the front of the client, because it's so important. The both person understand the needs, understand the technical limitation of the client, understand the many part of the background, the different individuals involved. So I would say a bit of both, but definitely for some accounts, you clearly need this long-standing relationship. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would also say that as SEs, we can take the time to educate our AEs in the solution or products that we are selling together.
From a technical perspective.
Yes.
I absolutely agree 100%. And I think that from what you say and what we talk about, there's another tip here for the seller side on how to nurture and cultivate this relationship, is to get a little bit technical. So when you are a seller and you're starting your journey at a new company, usually you are bombarded with those messaging, decks and the why us and how to and the competitors and so on. But take some time to really know what you're selling in like a hands-on fashion. This is one of the trends that I regret in our industry is that companies take the sellers less and less into the product and more into the words, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Also gets the respect of the pre-sales. I think that one of the things, that I saw when I was at Tableau, and obviously back then, we can say it's not a state secret. Back then, when you were hired for Tableau, during the hiring process, you'd have to do a demo, hands-on demo of the product. You had to do it even before you joined. And that's different. It's really different from today.
You're right. Actually, when I joined Tableau, one of the persons that I learned the most, technically speaking, was from the AE that I started working with, Simon. He already knew how to solve technically quite a lot of use cases. So for the audience listening to this episode today, I would really recommend talking to your AEs. They might surprise you, actually.
Yeah. And I think it's important to make a distinction here. It doesn't necessarily mean you're diving into a feature function discussion.
Yes.
Because we don't want to sell features and functions. This is a general rule, right? When you want to sell something and you have a competitive landscape, if you compete for a feature function, you're on par with the others or less successful than them. But it's the technical credibility that gets you from the starting point to talking about the value points and the discovery stuff and all of those things that connect the dots. But it's a good distinction to make because we're not really selling feature functions. We are selling the value, but we need to get this across first.
It's an expectation basically from the client. Yeah.
100%. One of the things that I learned during my time as a seller is that whatever company you work for, if you take their product and put it in front of the competition and you do a criteria list, everyone says yes to all.
Yes, exactly.
It's as simple as that. Everyone says yes to all. It's just the nuances and the how-tos and the things revolving the actual product, the services around it, the how-to, the methodology around it, the community around it. Those are the things that usually gets you above your competition.
Definitely, exactly. So, very last question for you, Adi. What is the most single important professional advice you ever received?
Wow, that's a good one.
That's a tricky one, right?
Yes.
My first manager at Tableau came to me one day and I said, I have to do this and this and this and this. And he told me, you know what? No one will die if you do it later. Think about it first. And some of those problems will solve themselves before you get to them. And that was so true. So it's not very much a professional advice on how to actually succeed in selling, but it's something that a seller that has multiple tasks on their hands could really benefit from. Because if you try to pace yourself and to wait a little before you answer everyone, and you get tons of emails and you get tons of calls and everyone, and you want to make things move forward, but some of those things will go away and your time will be better spent like this.
I really like it. It's around self and time management.
Yeah. On something more professional, I think in the same way. So the same manager told me about things that we talked about earlier in this podcast, the power of no. And the power of no, use it wisely, obviously. Don't say no to everything, otherwise you won't sell anything. But the power of no can come in different forms. You can say, like we said earlier, you challenge the customer and so on, blah, blah, blah. You can also say no to a deal. You can say no to a process that you figure out it would take more time, effort, and resources from you, and you might get to a rock bottom and you lose the deal. So you might lose a lot of time and you lose the deal anyway. So you need to identify I won't say failure because it's just a misfit. It doesn't mean it's failure. It just doesn't fit. You need to identify this failure in advance, and you save a lot of time and effort. It's sort of fail fast. If you fail fast. This is one of the advices that I got. Yeah,
I like it. It's like a life advice in one way, because it can be applied so many different areas as well.
100%. And Adi, we know you're busy, so I would just like to once again thank you so much for coming to the podcast. You're an amazing account executive, and we really had a great time.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm so happy for you for this initiative. I was mentioning it to you, Christian, before we started recording, that I really love the way you do it. It's so professional, and it's the first time I'm a guest in a podcast, and I feel really honored that you had me here today.
Hopefully it won't be the last.
Exactly. So see you all next week. Thanks for listening to this episode. This podcast represents our views and not the ones of our employers.
Our mission at the Data Coffee Break podcast is to inform you and help you grow in this always changing data field.
Follow us and get into the conversation with the community on our LinkedIn page and Instagram.
See you next Tuesday, and until then, keep your data caffeinated.